Update number 3, road to Leadville. Yeah, I'm wearing the same clothes. I'm kind of getting caught up. So this one is fun because I am going to talk about what my experience was in learning about bicycles and where my head was at and how I went through and figured out what I ended up liking and what I ended up ordering. So long story short is way back in the dark ages, back in 1990, my first real job out of school from the University of Wyoming was I managed a couple departments and I was a wrench for a company called REI. I opened a store out in Tualatin, Oregon. It was kind of fun, but I got to learn a lot. I wanted to be good at my job, so I learned as much as I could back then about bicycles and what was available then and technology. And I did for a few years there, and I was about as up to date as you could possibly be. And then I've kind of let it all go. And I've road biked and I've done stuff here and there, but not a ton. And during different times of my life, when I lived in Oregon, I commuted all the way through Portland to work and back and forth a lot. When I lived in Vail, I lived down valley, and I went from Eagleville all the way up. And I would commute and ride my bike a lot into work, and loved doing that. Starting to do that again, but my economics were different when I had ProForm. ProForm is access if you're in the industry. They'll give you an option to buy stuff below discount, below wholesale, because they want you to be a performance or they want you to ride. But haven't had that in a long time. And anyway, so where I am now is I want to make sure that whatever piece of equipment I have, I get the very best that I can. And my economics are different, so I said, well, open my wallet up. You know, this is going to be something that's fun and I can appreciate it and I will have good value with it. So going through that, I wanted to start looking at where things were and what they are now. So back in the day, I bought the very best I could. It was a Cannondale aluminum frame, high bottom bracket. I put the first fork on something that didn't have a suspension fork. That's how old I am. And the wheels were all about 26.5 inch. That was just standard. That's what everything was. Well, some of the major changes from back in the dark ages to now on bicycles are obviously the componentry is new and updated, but they still basically shift. Shifting is similar in a lot of the philosophies, but the brakes are different. Brakes have they have calipers. It's a completely different type of braking system that is awesome and works really, really, really well. So love how the new brakes are. Most of the wheels, and I chose to go with, you're going to find now are 29 inch, which is roughly a 700cc, which is similar to the same size as a road bike, which sort of maximizes the rolling and minimizes the rolling resistance. Makes it a little bit harder in some up and downs and places like that. But anyway, the other thing is the sophistication level of the types of bikes. Whether you have a full suspension, which means it's got an adjustment in the rear and in the front, so it'll keep most of the wheels on the ground all the time. Front suspension, hardtail, meaning that it's a little bit lighter, a little bit faster, beat you up a little bit more. And then also the geometries. And the geometries are, if you have the wheels, you have the front, and let's say that this is your front fork. Well, the angle that fork sits at, where the wheel sits in front, and you have your handlebars that sit up here, is called the rake. And the different rake allows you, the steeper it is, well, it's going to be a little more aggressive, probably a little bit easier to climb, but the further the rake out is in front, the easier it is to have a downhill bike that's going to be easier for you to get in the right positions on the bike. Long story short is it used to be you had to, as the rider, handle a lot of those things. There's all-terrain, there's bikes now, though, that are specific to just downhill, that are just specific to trail, that are just specific to cross-country, to all sorts of stuff. And it was amazing for me to start going through, a little mind-blowing. By the time you look at componentry, what goes on the bike, the frame and what makes the materials that are used to build the bike, and then the different intention of how you're planning to use the bike and what that looks like. So being in Omaha, we don't have, there's places that have great really wonderful road bikes. There's a lot of road biking here, and if you want to spend 15 grand on a road bike, you can go test those. You can find those here and look at them, which is pretty cool. But when it came to the mountain biking, not a lot there. There are, but there's a handful, but not a ton. So it's been interesting for a challenge for me to kind of go through and figure out who had what, and then maybe I would try it in aluminum if I wanted a carbon fiber or whatever. But long story short is I decided I was going to shoot the lock off my wallet, and whatever I thought was the appropriate amount I was going to spend. I was going to look at the right bike first and money second, which is different thinking for me, but it was a good experience. So with that, I looked at bikes. I looked at Specialized, and Specialized has some really great super light cross-country race bikes, which were awesome. I really like Santa Cruz. I like their tall boy. It felt good. Wasn't necessarily the ideal cross-country bike, but good for comfort. I checked out a company called Pivot, another one Yeti, Ibis, and Trek. So I looked at a lot of different bikes, and I read a lot of reviews, and it is so cool on how much is out there to get feedback from different people on what is available, what isn't. So I was close to pulling the trigger on a Specialized, the Specialized hardtail that was super light, unbelievable the pricing that things come in at, or the weight. You could actually get a race bike that's about 21 pounds, 22 pounds. Another thing that's different is that the wheels are bigger and almost all of them are tubeless, meaning that they don't have tubes, so that saves about 1.5 pounds-ish. If you pull the tubes out, they put some goo in there and away you're off the races. But it sounds like there's good options with that. But I ended up really thinking about it and thinking, geez, my goal is to not get swept. This is a 12-hour race. My goal is to finish it. And even though it's not that technical, you're still spending a lot of time in the saddle, and you're going to have your butt handed to you over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I think fatigue in the long term is going to be something that's going to be a factor. So even though it's hard to kind of justify a full suspension mountain bike here in Nebraska, I chose to get a nice full suspension mountain bike. So was close to the Santa Cruz Tallboy, but I wasn't sure on that one. The Pivot and the Yeti, I like those, but weight-wise and not really being able to test them as much. And I ended up going on riding on a Trek, and I ended up riding a Trek Top Fuel. And I got to tell you, I just fell in love with the bike. I rode it, and it rode really, really well for me. And it finally clicked in my head when people say, well, once you ride one, you know what's going to be your fit, that'll be your fit. So it was an aluminum frame. It's not completely aggressive. They've made some modifications in 2020. So it's sort of it's not a hardcore cross-country racer, but it's not a full-on trail bike. It's kind of that in between both. So it should be really, really comfortable, and it should be a really fast bike. So then I looked at the different componentry. So the componentry is what goes on the bike, meaning the types of shifters, your brakes, the wheels, the cranksets, the headsets, that kind of stuff. What are those things that go on the bike? There's what are the materials that the frame is made out of, and then what are the wheels and wheel sets and things like that. And again, it was really interesting to go through all this. So I was really close to doing the SRAM. SRAM is by far, they've done exceptionally well. And they did a big innovation where they shifted, so it's a single cog up front, a small cog, and then an 11 or 12 in the back. And the SRAM Eagle is just really great stuff. One little thing that just annoys me is just if you're not always pedaling, they've got, that makes a lot of noise. It's always just, which is fine, and some people think that's cool, but I want to be quiet when I'm out by myself if I can. So, little thing, not a big deal. And then I also looked at the fact that I still have that Cannondale from 30 years ago, and it has Shimano XT on there. It was before XTR came out. It's still great. Everything still works really, really well on that. It just, I kind of got tired of the bike. I will never get rid of it because I love it, but So that was interesting. So I did a lot of research, and Shimano has just in the last couple of years come out with some new stuff, but I know how consistent Shimano's been and all the reviews, and again, it's just so wonderful to be able to see all these reviews. You can go as deep in the weeds researching everything as you want. So I ended up deciding to go with a Shimano rig. And so with this, I looked at Shimano XT, XTR, the different variations. Then they have one that's actually an electronic version, which is kind of cool, but I really, the less brain damage, the less maintenance, the less I have to plug, maybe that's just me being old, but I don't mind a few extra ounces of cables to know that the cable's there and that I don't have to worry about forgetting a battery to do the electronic shifting or the dropper post or any of that other stuff. So so I ended up choosing, I thought I would go with the XTR, but I looked at it, and weight-wise, there's a certain rule of thumb that after about $7,000, for every ounce you're spending $100 or something like that. It's insane. And I started looking at it, just, oh my God, really? So what I chose to do, I've ordered, there we go. That is that. That is the color. Yeah, I went vain. I ended up doing my own color combo. I've decided I'm going to launch a new brand in 2020 called the Hippie Capitalist. Yay! Go Hippie Capitalist. People who are living on their terms, life on their terms, in their own way, embracing what success looks like as they choose. And I'm going to sponsor this bike. Yes, thank you, Miss Accountant, for suggesting that, because then I can write it off. This is all business expense. It's pretty legit. So what I did is, by doing the custom, I did the custom paint. It's going to allow me to do some custom stuff for branding on the bike itself. But it also allowed me to make a couple of very simple changes that I wanted to, by doing the, what do they call it, Project One, to where I was able to upgrade the wheels. It was about a $500 or $300 upgrade, but it was about a half a pound. And I think the wheels were a little bit better. So I ended up going with full Top Fuel 2020, carbon fiber, custom paint, Dior XT. Chose not to go with the XTR because literally it was less than $1/4 pound for another $4,000. New wheels, different wheels. It has a dropper post, which is cool. Again, that's new to the old guy here. And so everything without pedals, it came in about $6,500 after a little discount, a little horse trading with them. So I think overall, I think it's going to be an amazing bike. I'm really, really, really excited to see what it looks like. Ordered some XTR pedals that I'll throw on there when it comes in. But long story short, that should be a bike that I could have if I want for another 30 years. So that's been a lot of fun to go down that road, figuring out what it looks like. When I see it, I will definitely be showing it to you, and I'll walk you through, give you 2 cents worth on that. But long story short, I think it should be fun, and it's been a really fun journey figuring that stuff out. So thank you all for listening.